Welcome everyone. Equalex's Bridgette Jackson, and I'd like to welcome Jessica Carter. Hi Jessica, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. So today we're going to talk about how mediation can have a positive effect on your divorce. And the exciting thing is that Jessica has now joined us, haven't you, Jessica, as part of Equalex's, utilising her mediation skills and her fantastic work as a conflict resolution coach. So we really want to welcome you on board. Fantastic to have you as part of the team. So let's talk about your experience that you've had. You've had extensive experience as a mediator and a conflict coach and facilitator, and you've got specialist skills in family disputes, separation, coaching and crisis. We'll talk about more of that in a minute. Workplace transformation and multi-party negotiations. Tell us more about your coaching and crisis.
Well, from my perspective, every conflict has an element of crisis in it. And so we often think about crisis negotiations and crisis situations as those matters where life is threatened, or that many people are involved. But really, a crisis is something that you can experience in your family situation. Anything that puts yourself under threat, your family under threat, or threatens the order that you've been accustomed to, will feel like a crisis to people. So I tend to like to hear that word used, in its broadest sense, so that people can get an understanding of what it is that they're feeling, and that it is real and it is something that they need to attend to and get some help with.
Absolutely. So you're a registered family dispute resolution practitioner. You've also received advanced training in mediation negotiation at Harvard Law School, and you're a member of the American Bar Association and the American Bar Association section of dispute resolution. So you've had a huge amount of experience, haven't you, in terms of mediation?
Well, over the last 20 years, yes, definitely. And I have always been a fan of more negotiation study for me, because negotiation is such a very big and important part of mediation, helping people negotiate and helping them to do this well. And also in the conflict coach space, we are often helping people become better at communicating and negotiating with others so that they can get a better outcome than the one that they are used to achieving.
So the question I have for you is, when should people start the mediation process as it relates to their divorce, or divorce mediation as it's sometimes called?
Well, start as early in the process as you're able to, before matters escalate to the point where it's very, very difficult to speak to each other. I think that mediation starts, when there are matters in dispute or when communication has ceased. They'll often start in our work when couples need a parenting plan. And so the first step for couples with children is to mediate and have a mediation situation where they can decide how they're going to co-parent, how they're going to share those responsibilities, and where there are dependent children. All the small matters add up: the pickups, the drop-offs, the spending time at each other's homes. All of those matters can be decided early on when people have made that decision to move through separation and divorce.
Well, so how does divorce mediation actually work?
Well, there are several aspects to divorce mediation. The first I've just mentioned, which is giving the children certainty and looking after their needs and interests. The court's very clear that the care and protection of the children is something that should be first and foremost in parents' eyes. But the other aspects that can be part of divorce mediation will be relationship property, financial matters, trusts, estates, wills, other matters that people do need to decide upon. They are not necessarily all going to be decided in court. When people meet and discuss this with their lawyer, they may decide that some of this needs to go to mediation or some kind of blended process.
Mm. So how long on average does a mediation take?
Well, big question. I think that I tend to think in terms of setting aside half a day or a whole day. Having said that, if you think that something's going to be over in 2 hours, it might take 4. That's what I think of in terms of half a day. And similarly, if you've set it down for half a day and it moves forward into the afternoon session, then I always set down a whole day for it from my end. And I think that normally when you are more familiar with the matters that are going to be discussed at mediation, it becomes easier to fine-tune that time frame.
And sometimes it's like looking into a crystal ball, isn't it? Sometimes it can be very difficult to actually get an idea before the mediation how long things are going to take, because it does really depend on the parties involved and their responses and how they act during the process, doesn't it?
Very much so. I think that if parties are finding it really difficult to communicate, some of that time taken in mediation is just unlocking their ability to speak for themselves, speak together. And so that situation might require the mediator to be moving from a joint session into private sessions with parties where they're assisting them to get ready for the next conversations they're about to have. And although the parties are making the decisions, the mediator in that case will be assisting people in how they present themselves and how they make their proposals. If that's the case, those private sessions can eat up quite a lot of your mediation time, for all the right reasons. And as an example, if you are spending 20 minutes speaking with one party, then when you close off that conversation and move to speak with the other, you're going to give them 20 minutes of your time as well, so that they feel that, there's a very balanced conversation happening. Or, add that up to 40 and another 10 minutes for a break. And, that's quite a chunk of time. So it really does, as you say, depend on how that communication is tracking. Also, the other aspect that impacts on how long they take is whether you're doing it like we are in a video conference setting, or whether you're in person in a room. Pre-COVID, we would have found most situations working with people were happening in a room. At mediation rooms in the same room together, having private sessions in rooms that are adjacent to the mediation room. And typically in that situation, parties would be waiting while the settlement agreement was drawn up, and they would sign it on the spot, and the mediator would close the mediation on that day. In the video conference, and I'll use Zoom as an example, this dynamic is quite different. It's quite different having private situations in the separate conference rooms online. It is a situation where parties might close off with you, but you may be working on their settlement agreement and swapping this by email until this is signed. So now we've got a different time frame happening. And then the video conference session can also be quite tiring. So many more breaks through the day, even though there might be shorter breaks in the session, actually the time adds up. And so Your timing's a really interesting one. We do get a much better indication closer to the day, though.
Yeah. So how does divorce mediation differ to going to court?
Well, fundamentally, in mediation, you as the parties decide the outcome. And in court, a judge decides this for you. So that's a fundamental difference. I think there are many more differences in that this is likely to be a faster process. It's a process that actually potentially involves less people. So when you're in court, there may have been a lot of people involved in gathering the evidence that you need. That's not always the case, though. If your mediation is about complex matters, you are going to have the same amount of work happening in the background to prepare you for the day. But it is the fundamental difference is that this is a situation where parties decide the outcome.
That's right.
And the mediator is really facilitating them to be able to do that.
And there's big pluses, advantages in terms of mediation, as you mentioned about the time factor. And of course, there's the cost factor, which can be massive going to court. And then obviously less emotional toll for a shorter period with undertaking mediation. There's so many advantages. And particularly with COVID, it's taking 2 to 2.5 years now to get to court. So it's an option that we don't advise. We in terms of guidance, we like to work with people who that is certainly the very last option available to them.
Yeah. I agree with that approach. And I think that, people fundamentally do want to be in control of their own decision making.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of you as an expert, what's 3 tips that you would give people who are thinking about going through a mediation?
Read widely about what mediation is. And so there is, good information on your website about what it involves. Second, take advice on whether mediation is the best process for you. So most people in the divorce process will have identified someone to give them legal advice. So listen to what your lawyer says about the options for mediation and the benefits. Third, if couples have children, definitely think about the focus on their care and protection, what they need and what their interests are, and the benefits of mediation in that situation is that children do know that you have been collaborating with their best interests at heart.
And then another thing that I think is really important, because as I've seen in the past, a lot of people aren't prepared for mediation. So through Equalexes, through myself and Jessica, you can actually undertake some pre-mediation coaching in preparation for your divorce mediation, which is incredibly worthwhile for people and helps them immensely at the mediation and post-mediation as well.
I think I agree. I think that some of the processes are, before and after mediation aren't really clearly articulated. Before you start a mediation, there is an assessment process to decide if the matter is actually suitable for mediation, because there are some situations when mediation is not appropriate.
Domestic violence being one of them.
Violence, I think any abuse that prevents a person from speaking up for themselves. And, any situation where people are feeling threatened or vulnerable to the point of not being able to participate definitely aren't suitable. One of the other ones that's perhaps less talked about is when one party is not willing to do mediation. It does take 2 to say, yes, we're going to do this. can't mediate with one and have an absent party. And any other mental health or physical situation which prevents somebody from participating. So once that assessment has been made, then there's also an agreement between the parties to mediate. And this is agreeing with the terms and the process of mediation. So you do need to get prepared, have an understanding of what you're entering into, understand that it is going to be confidential to the parties, any people in support at the mediation and the mediator themselves. So you need to undertake to keep it confidential before you enter into the process. And the big one is the preparation. There's a significant commitment to preparation so that you do the best you can on the day.
Absolutely. Final parting words, Jessica, in relation to divorce mediation from you?
Well, I think the benefits, you are in control of the decisions and there's less time involved. We've talked about it does give, if there are children involved, it does give them certainty, and considering that is important. If you are mediating or having a private arbitration process in mediation or in family law, you do have your financial and personal matters kept confidential. And I think focusing on your needs and having a chance to share those with the other party, I think those are important benefits of mediation also.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jessica, for joining us today. Jessica and I are going to be doing a Facebook Live every